राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन जमुना तीर वनचारी जमुना तीर वनचारी जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गौ प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि वो जय ओम विष्णुपद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तरशत श्री श्रीमद् श्री अभय चरणानंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर महाराज श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्री ठाकुर हरिदास की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंद गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की जय। गंगा देवी की जय। यमुना माई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय, तुलसी रानी की जय, समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय, श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जय, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, इस्कॉन बीवीथी संस्थापक आचार्य श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, श्रीपाद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, श्रीपाद श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद तिरोभव महोत्सव की जय, गौ प्रेमानंदी. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्. वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतपरकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथन्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च. हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकाकांत राधाकांत नमोस्तुते. तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये. वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद. हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. मद्गवीरवि गोपाल स्वीकुर्यात् कृपया यदि तदैवासां पयः पीत्वा हृष्येयुस्तत्प्रियजनाः. नमः ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती इति नामने. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at His lotus feet. Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Dayataya Kripabdhiye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances to Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Dayata Dasa, who is favored by Srimati Radharani and who is the ocean of transcendental mercy and the deliverer of the science of Krishna. Madhuryojjvala Premarthya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karunashakti Vigrahaya Namostate. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, the personified energy of Sri Chaitanya's mercy, who delivered devotional service which is enriched with conjugal love of Radha and Krishna, coming exactly in the line of revelation from Srila Rupa Goswami. Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarane Rupanuga Viruddhapa Siddhanta Dvanta Harine. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are the personified teachings of Lord Chaitanya. You are the deliverer of the fallen souls. You do not tolerate any statement which is against the teachings of the devotional service enunciated by Srila Rupa Goswami. So today is the most exalted appearance day of the disappearance anniversary of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, spiritual master of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder and Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Srila Prabhupada had some template, institutional template for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness already in the form of the Sri Chaitanya Math, Sri Gaudiya Math, now various branches, which were established by his own spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had everything that he needed from his father, except for initiation. And his father sent him to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji for his initiation, Diksha. But just as Srila Prabhupada said, everything he learned about Krishna consciousness came from his father and was later on solidified by his spiritual master, so we can say in a similar way that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually learned everything from his father, but took initiation upon his order from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, who was the greatest of the saintly persons in Navadvip in those days. Actually, he had several gurus, Shiksha gurus. The Vamshi Das Babaji was there, his own father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was there, Jagannath Das Babaji was there for some time also, and of course, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. It would be very difficult to imagine ISKCON without Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And we don't really, there would be no chance, practically speaking, very little chance of finding any information about Bhaktivinoda Thakur or any of the wonderful songs or books that he wrote without his son, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who saw in his wisdom and tremendous foresight the value of what his father was giving to the world and the work that his father put into giving that contribution to the world of Vaishnavism. In the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, virtually there were only Sahajyas in the name of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and it was not very well respected as a result of that. People saw the so-called Vaishnavas as just beggars and persons with dubious moral character. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, after a very objective and wide-ranging search for the absolute truth, actually came to the conclusion that it was in his own hands already, what he had received from his upbringing, Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And unfortunately, in his time, it was hardly possible even to find any bona fide information, Shastric information about Gaudiya Vaishnava teachings. All of this has come from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And the hard work that he put into researching this tradition and making it accessible to all of us. So it's described that he couldn't even find a copy of the Chaitanya Charitamrita in West Bengal. It's kind of like when I first went to Tiruchendur in the deep south, India, famous Shaiva Skanda Kshetra actually. It's quite possible that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited that place also when he was touring South India. But I asked around to the various pundits there, and nobody had a complete copy of the Skanda Purana. That's in the probably the second most prominent Skanda temple in India. Anyway, so such was the situation of Vaishnavism at the turn of the last century. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, out of profound appreciation for everything that his father had done and accomplished, he had to make sure that this thing went on. It was the explicit instruction of his father, Bhaktivinoda, to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to propagate Krishna consciousness. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was insightful enough to recognize that it had to take an institutional form. In those days especially, for the last maybe 150 years at least, Christian missionaries had been and remain active throughout India, but particularly they were centered in West Bengal because in those days that was the capital of India, British capital. So on the model of Christian missionary institutions, he founded this Gaudiya Math. And Gaudiya Math was able to train so many wonderful Vaishnavas, and the moon amongst so many stars, we can say, in the Gaudiya Math was our own founder Acharya, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Just as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur deeply appreciated and had tremendous faith and dedication and devotion to his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Prabhupada came with that faith and with that dedication and appreciation for everything that he received from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he tried to instill it in a few of his followers as well. So he has done that. Just as Srila Prabhupada spread Krishna consciousness all over the world with the help of his able and sincere disciples, so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur established the Gaudiya mission, Gaudiya Math, Chaitanya Math. Now it's splintered into so many different groups, but this was all his hard work, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Prabhupada was one of those who derived the benefit. Throughout his life, throughout his spiritual life with the Gaudiya Math, Srila Prabhupada was always a very favored Kripa Patra of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Prabhupada told us that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was always very, very kind to him and very favorable to him. Even when his godbrothers, the other disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, were a little bit critical. As we all know, godbrothers can be critical and discouraging sometimes. So, Srila Prabhupada was nonetheless encouraged directly from his spiritual master. For one example, someone in the Gaudiya Math, I think it was Bhakti Saranga Goswami, who happened to be a direct family representative of Lord Nityananda, for your information. Quite a significant personality in his own right. But he suggested to his spiritual master that why doesn't Abhay Babu, in those days he was known, our Prabhupada, why doesn't he join Gaudiya Math and become full-time with us? He can be the president in Mumbai, because actually Srila Prabhupada started the Mumbai branch of Gaudiya Math. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur replied that you just leave him alone. Better he not associate or join your company. He'll do everything on his own. That was his typical attitude. And in October of 1935, I think it was, Srila Prabhupada had visited Vrindavan, and he was invited to go and see Sheshashai. Raise your hand if you've seen Sheshashai here in Braj Mandala. Famous temple of Mahavishnu lying on Ananta Shesh. And Srila Prabhupada had the option that you can go and take darshan of Sheshashai, or we can hear from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And this was during the parikrama that was organized by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Speaking of parikramas, he also is the one who is the founder of this traditional practice every year of circumambulation of Navadvip Dham. Just as we do here in Vrindavan, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is the one who started the practice of Navadvip Mandala Parikrama. Before him, it was not done. So anyway, Srila Prabhupada thought, I can hear from him. Better to hear from him. 90% of the people who had come for the parikrama went to see Sheshashai Vishnu. But Srila Prabhupada decided to hear, and he heard attentively. Even Srila Prabhupada said, I couldn't always understand what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was saying. Raise your hand if you've had this problem. Do you find it difficult to understand some of the things that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says? Sometimes a little difficult. High English, even for a native speaker. You can see this in Brahma Samhita, for example. But Srila Prabhupada said, I went on hearing. What kind of hearing? Srila Prabhupada mentions throughout his books a certain phrase, which is a very Prabhupada kind of phrase. Rapt attention. What does that mean with rapt attention? To hear with rapt attention. It means that even when the ladies were making garlands in the Srimad Bhagavatam class, Srila Prabhupada did not want that to happen because their attention was splayed. It's not so noisy activity, or at least it shouldn't be. But Srila Prabhupada saw that as a disturbance. Why? Because in one lecture he was sitting and hearing with rapt attention from his spiritual master, and another person leaned over and asked him a question to clarify what he had also heard. And that was such a disturbance to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that he chastised that disciple, and Prabhupada said, oh, this is so important thing. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had noted this about Srila Prabhupada, that he's able to hear, and he wants to hear also. We were reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, just the other night. One of the most important passages of the Bhagavatam, which would probably do well to memorize, all of you. Chapter 2, 1st canto. And there Prabhupada writes in one purport that the Kanishta Adhikaris, or the neophyte devotees, they hardly have any taste for hearing anything at any time. Hardly any taste. Really have to work at this, to fix the mind and discipline oneself to just open the books and read them. It's not so easy when we are neophytes, which we are. We don't have a taste. But Srila Prabhupada, somehow, he was eager to hear. And this really impressed Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So of course, he initiated him. And in November 1935, Srila Prabhupada was again with his spiritual master in Vrindavan. It was Kartik, the ideal time to visit. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was staying for a month with his disciples at Radha Kund. I'm here just paraphrasing what we have from the Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, Volume 1, Chapter 4, by Satsvarup Das Goswami, authorized biography of Srila Prabhupada. After leaving Mumbai in July, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had gone to Calcutta. He had given programs on the radio, he delivered many public lectures, he'd welcomed back the preachers that he sent to Europe, and he finished publishing his Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary. Very, very important work. Then in October, he had come to Radha Kund. Occupying the small one-story house Bhaktivinoda Thakur had constructed there, he had been reading and speaking to the assembled devotees on the Upanishads, Ishopanishad, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. He had also installed deities at Sri Kunja Vihari Math. 5,000 years ago, Radha and Krishna had engaged in transcendental pastimes here, And only 500 years ago, Lord Chaitanya had rediscovered Radha Kund. Lord Chaitanya's great follower, Raghunath Das Goswami, had resided there for many years, constantly chanting Hare Krishna and discussing the activities of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, in a small bhajan kutir there, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami also compiled the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which was so much appreciated by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So, having heard of his spiritual master's stay there, Abhay, who refers to our Srila Prabhupada, brought his son with him and traveled from Mumbai just to have darshan of his spiritual master. To see Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was always an occasion for jubilation, but to see him in Vrindavan was an added perfection. This meeting with his beloved guide and friend was different from the time in 1932, when Abhay had seen him on the Vrindavan Parikrama. Now Abhay was no longer sitting anonymously in the back of the room. Now he was a bona fide disciple, recognized as the Kavi, poet, who had written the praiseworthy poem and essay, and the young man who had listened well, the devotee who had helped with the Allahabad Math and who had established the Math in Mumbai. Already on this visit, Abhay had had occasion to be alone with his spiritual master who had remembered Abhay's son and presented him with a small Bhagalbanti jacket. Just see the character of saintly persons. They still do this to this day. They show affection even for your children. And now as they walked together alone on the bank of Radha Kund, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur turned and spoke confidentially to Abhay. There had been some quarreling amongst his leading disciples in Kolkata, he said, and this distressed him very much. Even now in Vrindavan, it weighed heavily on his mind. Some of his disciples had been fighting over who would use various rooms and facilities at the Gaudiya Math headquarters in Kolkata. That's the big marble Baghbazar temple. Some of you are seated. These devotees were all members of the same Math, and the building was for propagating Krishna consciousness under the leadership of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Yet, even in their spiritual master's presence, they were quarreling. Sometimes it happens like that, doesn't it? Brahmanas and Vaishnavas were supposed to be free from envy of any creature. What to speak of envy of one another? If they were to fight now, what would they do after their spiritual master passed away? Well, we now have the answer to that question, don't we? Hindsight is always 20/20, as they say. We know very well what happened. Abhay had no part in these matters and did not even know the details of who was involved. But as he listened to his spiritual master, he also became distressed, deeply concerned. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said to Abhay, Agun jwalbe, there will be fire. One day there would be fire in the Gaudiya Math, and the fire of party interests would spread and destroy, which indeed it did. Abhay heard but did not know what to make of it. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had fought so long and boldly to establish that anyone of any birth could be elevated to become a Brahmin, sannyasi, or Vaishnava. But if his followers became contaminated by a little wealth and the desire for prestige, thereby showing themselves to be still low-class men despite their training and purification, then his mission would be disrupted. If in the name of religion they became attached to ease, position, and prestige, it could only mean that they had failed to grasp the teachings of their spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada said, quote, he was lamenting that these men are simply after the stones and bricks of the building. He condemned. He was very, very sorry. When we were living in a rented house, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, If we could collect 200 or 300 rupees, we were living very nicely at Ultardanga. We were happier then. But since we've been given this marble palace at Baghbazar, there is friction between our men. Who will occupy this room? Who will occupy that room? Who will be the proprietor of this room? Everyone is planning in different ways. It would be better to take the marble from the walls and secure money. If I could do this and print books, that would be better. Abhay felt that his spiritual master was speaking to him in urgency, as if asking him for help or warning him to avert a disaster. But what could he do? Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati then said directly to Abhay, "Amar ichha chilo kichu boi karana." If I had a desire to print books. If you ever get money, print books. Standing by Radha Kund and beholding his spiritual master, Abhay felt the words deeply enter his own life. If you ever get money, print books. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Now we can get some sense why Srila Prabhupada was so fixed on this principle that he said, books are the basis, preaching is the essence, utility is the principle, purity is the force. Books are the basis. Just like a tree. ISKCON is a kalpavriksha tree for anyone seriously interested in getting Krishna. ISKCON is the kalpavriksha tree to fulfill that desire. But the roots of that tree are these books. And this is why Srila Prabhupada so strongly and repeatedly and urgently and constantly pushed us to read the books. First of all, you have to read them. You cannot give what you don't have. And then distribute the books widely. Print books in as many languages and distribute. We all know, famous lecture in Los Angeles. So here's where it comes from. He didn't invent anything, Srila Prabhupada, about Krishna consciousness. Whatever he taught us, nothing was invented. It came from his father, it came from his spiritual father. So this is one of those things. Now it's an unfortunate. He also had the history of Gaudiya Math in front of him before coming to the West, and he saw what happens when personal ambition will destroy everything. I think that's more or less a direct quote that I remember when Srila Prabhupada said, around 1976 or 7. And maybe it was here in Vrindavan even. Personal ambition will ruin everything. This is what he said. Keep it in mind. Prabhupada had it in mind. He was meditating on what happened with the Gaudiya Math, and he could understand very clearly. He was meditating on the Vani that he heard so carefully from his spiritual master, and he never forgot this instruction to print books. It essentially was the same instruction he received in 1922 when he first met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur at Ultardanga. So, this is the real purpose of ISKCON, and especially this month, every year, we really want to emphasize the importance of distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, because nothing we can do is going to compare to what these books have already done and will continue to do if we give them a chance. Srila Prabhupada again, famous quote, said, you just distribute the books and what will happen? The books will act. Krishne swadhamopagate dharmagyanadibhi saha kalau nashta trishamesha puranarko dhunoditaha. Now that Krishna has departed 5,000 years ago, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also has departed 500 years ago. Srila Prabhupada also departed 50 years ago. Who is there? What is there to guide us? Krishna remains in the form of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is full of Gauravani. And we have, even to make that clear to us, because it's necessary, many of us at least, who don't come from Vaishnava or even Hindu backgrounds. We need some purports. What purports do we need? We need the Bhakti-Vedanta purports. Accept no substitutes. Srila Prabhupada ki. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was pushing on these things. And all the instructions that Srila Prabhupada worked hard to implement within ISKCON, they're all ultimately coming from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. The deity worship, the book publication, the public preaching, Harinam Sankirtana, Prasadam distribution, everything. He invented nothing. He simply transmitted the same message, like a postal peon, Srila Prabhupada used to say. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was in poor health in Jagannath Puri in December of 1936. This is about a year later. Our Srila Prabhupada was in Mumbai, and he wanted to write his Guru Maharaj a letter. He was thinking that he's always been very kind to me, he'll understand. I want to do something for him. So he wrote that, you've got so many disciples, and they're brahmacharis and sannyasis, but I'm a householder. I can't do what they're doing. I can give money sometimes, I'm doing. But if there's any particular service that you want from me, please instruct me. Shishyaste ham shadhimam tvam prapannam. 2 weeks later, he received a reply. Quote, I'm fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant with the languages of the other members. This will do much good to yourself as well as to your audience. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings to the people in general, as well as philosophers and religionists. Abhay at once recognized this to be the same instruction he received at their first meeting in 1922. He took it as a confirmation. There was now no doubt as to the purpose of his life. What his spiritual master had said in Kolkata in 1922 had not been a chance remark, nor had that been a chance meeting. The instruction was the same. Turn yourself into a very good English preacher. This will do much good to yourself as well as to your audience. About 2 weeks later, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur passed away from this world. He was in poor health in Jagannath Puri. He came to Kolkata, and he was in Kolkata for some time. And when a doctor came, tried to give him injections, he protested. Actually, Srila Prabhupada told us that my spiritual master left this planet early. He was young when he left. He was not so old. But he left this world earlier than normal because he was disgusted. He was disgusted with the behavior of his so-called disciples. It has to be said. We would not be doing our spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, any justice by neglecting each and every instruction that he's given to us. And this is one of them. What happened to the Gaudiya Math? They harbored personal ambitions within their hearts. That destroyed their character and their Krishna consciousness, their devotion, such that they could not be empowered to transmit the same to the rest of the world, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur desired. Even in his presence, some of them were not able to be effective. Those who were sent to the European countries, they came back without having accomplished very much. They made one German man a devotee, Siddhanta. But on the whole, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was not very pleased with the fighting amongst his disciples. This is where, when we have problems with cooperation amongst devotees, it comes from personal ambition. Somebody is harboring a personal ambition. Which one is it? Well, you have to decide that. Nobody admits that they're doing it. Nobody even knows that they're doing it half the time. But this is the problem. Anyabhilashita shunyam hona chahiye. But it's not like that a great deal of the time. So, famous amongst his final instructions, he said, around that time, quote, I advise all to preach the teachings of Rupa Raghunath with all energy and resources. I think the GBC said quite a few years ago, whenever there's conflicts among devotees, it's usually one of three things. There's competition over limited resources, that's what we're looking at here. Or it's a miscommunication, that's also very common. Different people, different languages, they think differently, different assumptions and expectations. You have to deal with that. Or there is a clash in values for the same reasons. People have different conceptual systems of what is right and wrong, what should be done and what should not be done. So, our ultimate goal shall be to become the dust of the lotus feet of Sri Sri Rupa and Raghunath Goswamis. You should all work conjointly under the guidance of your spiritual master with a view to serve the absolute knowledge, the personality of Godhead. You should live somehow or other without any quarrel in this material world, only for the service of Godhead. Please do not, please give up the service of the Godhead in spite of all dangers, all criticisms, and all discomforts. Do not be disappointed, for most people in the world do not serve the personality of Godhead. Do not give up your own service, which is your everything and all. Neither reject the process of chanting and hearing the transcendental holy name of Godhead. You should always chant the transcendental name of Godhead with patience and forbearance like a tree, and humbleness like the straw. There are many amongst you who are well qualified and able workers. We have no other desire whatsoever. End quote. In his last days, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had remained fully conscious and had given instructions up until the end. He had specifically and openly ordered that the affairs of his Gaudiya Math be maintained by a 12-man governing body, that's a GBC, which the devotees should select among themselves. Finally, he said, please accept my blessings to you all, present and absent. Please bear in mind that our sole duty and religion is to spread and propagate service to the Lord and of his devotees. At 5:30 a.m. on January 1st, 1937, he breathed his last. So this is from the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. This same information is expanded upon by the very well-researched work of our godbrother Bhakti Vikas Swami in his Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhava, 3 volumes, encyclopedic knowledge of all things Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. There were 2 or 3 major members of the Gaudiya Math that made the Gaudiya Math work, actually. On the practical managerial side, there was Kunja Bihari, Kunja Babu, as they called him. Later on, I think he became, Pradeep Tirtha, no? I don't remember. He became a sannyasi. And then there was Ananta Vasudeva, who was on the theoretical side, philosophical side, so much so that when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was speaking, he would just look at Ananta Vasudeva, and Ananta Vasudeva would quote the verse that he was thinking of. That's how much empathy he had. And Kunjabihari's position was so influential also, and so trusted and dear, that when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was passing away from this world, he had asked Bhakti Dakshak Sridhar Swami, another sannyas disciple, to sing the song of Rupa Goswami, about Rupa Goswami, Shri Rupa Manjari Pala. And he started to sing. Kunja Bihari stopped him from singing and said this person should sing instead. He's a better singer. Raise your hand if you would do that. But he had that position in the Gaudiya Math. And yet both these men left the Gaudiya Math after the demise of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. One way or another, they both left. There are different stories, different histories of the breakup of the Gaudiya Math. But we can assume Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur knew best, and as Srila Prabhupada has already told us, that's why he left this world early. So it's a lesson to be learned for all of us, to be very careful what we're keeping inside of our hearts or what we're not getting out of our hearts. This is, in logic, we have this anvaya vyatireki vyapti, means you have to say the same thing positively and the same thing negatively. Just like always remember Krishna means never forget Krishna. Follow the four regulative principles, it means you give up these four things and you, on the positive side, you chant Hare Krishna 16 rounds. This is always the case. So he knew things in and out. He knew everything about his disciples. There's no question about it. Otherwise, how did he know Srila Prabhupada would be the one to spread Krishna consciousness? So many times there are indications that he knew what Srila Prabhupada was capable of. He knew who Srila Prabhupada was. He was confident. He didn't even bother to train him. He knew. He had come here by Krishna's grace. In the same way that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was the ray of Vishnu that Bhaktivinoda prayed for. So in the same way, it would seem, there is an indication at least, that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur understood the position of Srila Prabhupada. In fact, even Srila Prabhupada's own father had said things that indicated that he also understood what his position was. Anyway, so about 10 days before his disappearance, he had stated, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that he had so much service to perform in Vrindavan, but because of internal quarrels in the Math, his life was being shortened by 10 years. Would that we knew what kind of service he had to perform here in Vrindavan. He gave his last public address on December 23rd, 1936, 8 days before he left this world. I've already paraphrased a lot of it from the Srila Prabhupada Lilamritam, so there are so many things, but among the other things he said was, our only motto is Adadanas Trinam Dantairidam Yachet Punaha Puna Srimad Rupa Padam Bhoja Dhuli Syam Janma Janmani. Means, taking a blade of grass between my teeth, I fall down and pray again and again to become dust at the Srimad Rupa's lotus feet. Birth after birth. What Rupa? Who is this Rupa? It doesn't say. It just says Rupa. Maybe Rupa Manjari, maybe Rupa Goswami. Of course, it's both, obviously. Certainly there are multiple inconveniences while we are in this mortal domain, but there is no need either to be overwhelmed by them or to try to overcome them. We waste so much time in this effort. Rather, even during the duration of our present life, we must become acquainted with what we shall gain after surpassing all those difficulties. What shall be the mode of our permanent existence? In this world, we are compelled to make decisions regarding objects that evoke our attraction and revulsion, both those that we want and those we do not. Attachment and detachment in this damned existence increase according to the degree that we are separated from Sri Krishna's lotus feet. When we are able to transcend the position of attachment and detachment in this world of death, and are attracted by the holy name of Godhead, then only can we understand the taste of Krishna Seva Rasa. We're all probate devotees. We're in training, and we can do something exclusively under the sponsorship of a bona fide devotee like Srila Prabhupada or Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Otherwise, we have no connection, practically speaking. We've all given up our position in the spiritual world, and we have consequently been sent here for attitude adjustment. And it's not so easy thing. But he goes on to say, At the present time, Krishna's instructions seem highly startling and perplexing. Knowingly or unknowingly, everyone who is considered a human being is more or less struggling to eliminate those invading elements that baffle our perception of our eternal need. Our only requirement is to enter the kingdom of our eternal necessity by going beyond dualities. We have no love or hatred toward anyone in this world. All arrangements made herein are but temporary. Therefore, that supreme goal is indispensably necessary for everyone in this world. All of you should work unitedly and harmoniously for the same objective of attaining eligibility for seva to the original Ashraya Vigraha. He doesn't say that you are here to develop love of Godhead. He says you're here to develop eligibility for love of Godhead. That's very significant, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has been noted for a couple of things, but very prominent in his preaching strategy and in his Vani that he gave us is this declaration of war on hypocrisy of all kinds. Particularly, he was targeting the Prakrita Sahajiyas, those who want to take devotional service very casually and want to come and lose their hearts in Vrindavan and enter some kunj somewhere and experience Nitya Lila Rasasvadanam. Good luck. Most of us have to first recognize what the Mundaka Upanishad describes as the same absolute truth, which is what? An upraised thunderbolt weapon ready to strike your false ego dead. This is the mercy of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that he preached on that level because he saw this is the requirement, the preliminary requirement. Preliminary means you have to fulfill some precondition before you can get what you want. Like when you're in college, they're preliminary. You can't just go to an advanced nuclear physics class without having ever studied algebra. It's not possible. So, in the same way, Srila Prabhupada also, especially in his later years, he was increasingly emphasizing the necessity of approaching a vidhi-based approach to life. What does that mean, vidhi-based approach? Live your life according to the rules of the Shastras. In other words, Vaidhi Bhakti. Srila Prabhupada was not so keen on establishing in any public sphere or in any institutional manifestation this Raganuga Bhakti. He didn't really do that. Although certainly it's there, certainly it is our goal, no doubt. But Prabhupada expected that this would reveal itself naturally by following his instructions, which are of this nature. Follow the rules, be an ordinary devotee, do the standard thing, develop your eligibility by rooting out the anarthas. And this was the primary focus of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's teachings against the Sahajiyas in general, but others as well, so many different, what do we call them, Upasampradayas, just like we sang, Siddhanta Dvanta Harine. This is what he's known for. These mantras were actually, by the way, composed by Ananta Vasudev, Gaudiya Math devotee. They're not traditional before his time. He wrote them, all of them, for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, also for all of his gurus up to Bhaktivinoda, Jagannath, etc. So he saw this. This was a very, inescapable characteristic of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So in the same way, we have to understand that we have this requirement to, first of all, transcend the duality of our mundane existence because it colors our Krishna consciousness in unhealthy ways. And Srila Prabhupada is also, as I mentioned, he's given us at least something of a general direction, how we can do that, trajectory that we should follow. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's final concern was that we've heard it several times in the readings now that we've made. All of you conjointly work unitedly, cooperatively, spreading Krishna consciousness through this institution. Very familiar. We have the same mandate in ISKCON, but Srila Prabhupada took it a step further. If there is a question of cooperation or sustaining, what did he say in 1977? Two things. You all cooperate amongst yourselves and you maintain this institution as I have established it. We always thought that why is he saying only maintain it? We should expand it, right? But in the last 50 years, we've realized that it's not so easy to maintain anything, even what to speak of expanding. In the name of expanding, we often change things, and that creates a different trajectory. So, Srila Prabhupada gave us general guidelines, exactly how to cooperate and sustain. Sustenance. How do you say that in Sanskrit? Anybody know? Sustenance. What is the dhatu? Somebody should know this. I say this all the time if you heard my lectures. Dhri dhatu. Dhri. To bear something, just like Giridhara, he bears Govardhan Hill, holds it. You want to uphold something. You want to sustain something? That's what you're interested in. And the word dharma comes from that root. Dharma means that which sustains you. Dharma rakshiti, rakshitaha. So Srila Prabhupada gave us the means by which we can cooperate. Throughout his books, it's very clear, he says, this Varnashram, Daivi Varnashram system is meant for social solidarity, as Krishna calls it in chapter 3 of Bhagavad-Gita. Loka sangraham evapi. Ityadi. So, this is the instruction that we have neglected. Just as the Gaudiya Math made the mistake of neglecting the order to form of GBC, we got that part okay. It's still going on. Bumps and struggles, that's expected, but it's there. Now this is the next frontier, Varnashram Dharma. And particularly, Prabhupada used to emphasize, because we're all pragmatic, in those days especially, we were all pragmatic Westerners who think about gross things, like food and money. Prabhupada is emphasizing the socioeconomic aspect, agrarian aspects, simple living, high thinking. But the high thinking part, that has to be developed, because most of ISKCON's efforts at Varnashram have failed. Why? Because the conception is not mature. It has not been assimilated. Why not? Because we are not opening the books and hearing every day. That's why. It's simple as that. And not only that, but, well, I mean to say maybe because of that, at least partly because of that, we're also not repeating the same thing. We're changing things. So this is a great, sometimes we even change the books themselves. It has to be admitted. But there are certain things we can't say that Prabhupada said because we haven't assimilated them. So this is the next challenge for us. Every generation has to go through the same process. There's a very famous conversation actually in the mid to late 1980s. ISKCON had so many zonal acharya problems, and in following Srila Prabhupada's own advice, the GBC went to consult with his godbrother Sridhar Maharaj. He said, for philosophy you can consult him. Unfortunately, too many of them just went and surrendered to him wholesale, which should not have been done. But we could have learned from him. Because he told us, he himself narrated the whole history of the Gaudiya Math and then said, I think, he's speaking from his own wisdom, I think that this happens every generation. Every generation has to learn the same lessons and go through the same things in order to learn those lessons. So, these are things we have to think upon very soberly. Today is a day on which we can do so. We should all muster whatever sincerity and humility and surrender that we can, and fall at the lotus feet of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and beg from him for his blessings that we can fulfill the purpose of his most able disciple and most representative disciple, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And I'm going to take it a step further and say, give you a hint as to how to do that. It has to do with his books. Books are the basis. If we read the book, if the books are the basis, then the preaching, which is the essence, will go on. The utility will be properly done, and the purity will be there. That is guaranteed. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanande. Any questions or any comments? Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much for the instructive class. You insisted on this personal ambition. So how do we understand that when you are taking up some important role, of this personal ambition is not in line of the devotion or the parampara, and how to protect ourselves from that?
The mind is very sneaky, and in the 5th canto we hear the instruction that you should be very careful and never trust the mind. Even if you are living in Vrindavan, even if you feel that you have entered Ras Leela, still you should not trust your mind. This is the point. And how we can avoid these anarthas that do inhabit our hearts, or even invade our hearts if they weren't already there. Srila Prabhupada told his disciples, your children's worst flaw will be that they have to associate with you. Your grandchildren will be able to light fire with mantra. But your children's worst liability is that they have your association only. You want to become more humble than a blade of grass? Read these instructions. So in general, the advice from Rupa Goswami is that we should constantly seek the association of devotees who are deeper than us in their faith, but similar enough to us that we can have some relation, can relate somehow. And we can submit. How am I doing? Tell me, can you please give me some critique on what is my devotional character? How would you feel I'm harboring this or that anartha, etc., etc.? That's not so easy thing. You have to be free from false ego, and it's easier for women to do this than it is for men, because we have this big Purushabhiman, especially if we're born in August. But That's the advice, that seek the association of more advanced devotees and submit your position to them and ask them for guidance, and it will come. Krishna will arrange. But even then you have to still use your discrimination, because, there are wolves in sheep's clothing, we have seen. Panchagota, you want to make a comment?
Bhakti-Siddhanta was a paradise scholar and could speak on any subject matter with so many people. So we have so many of Srila Prabhupada's books with his direct instruction of what to do. But we're also living in Vrindavan, and there's so many Acharya books available, so many other books that maybe we should be hearing about, the angles of the different Acharyas, and so many books are there. So how do we know if we're crossing the line of sticking focused on Prabhupada's, fidelity or being chaste of Prabhupada and Prabhupada's teachings, or how much are we missing by not reaching out and hearing from the other Acharyas and other books?
This is a big question. It's an important question. And I was just thinking about this morning. When I was going through the list of all the things that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wrote. And I was thinking, here in Vrindavan, the emphasis is very strongly on this Goswami literature. And it should be so, no doubt. Rupa Raghunatha Pada Hoivi Akuti, ityadi. We hear from Narottam Das Thakur, there's no question of understanding Radha Krishna's Leelas without going through the Goswami literature. But actually, we have to develop the eligibility to hear from the Goswamis also. And we can get that most effectively, number one, from Srila Prabhupada's books, number two, from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's writings that he allowed us to read, number three, from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's. These books are not very much emphatic. They should be, because these books have the realizations of our most recent acharyas, realizations that are more, relevant to the modern world in which they were also preaching. 100 years ago is not that long ago. That's when the heyday of Gaudiya Math was exactly 100 years ago. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur is the one who brought this tradition into the modern world, practically speaking. So their realizations and their instructions, it would seem, I would say, this is my opinion now, somebody else may have a different idea. It would seem to me that their instructions are what is going to bring us into a position in which we can actually take better advantage of Goswami literatures when and if we have the adhikar to read those. But there is nothing that is missing in Srila Prabhupada's books, and the only people who don't know this are the people who don't read them. The reason we think we have to go elsewhere is because we're not reading Prabhupada's books. It's as simple as that. I say it all the time, but you cannot say it enough. Everything is there. If there's something not clear, that's another matter. Then we can go and see what so-and-so says. So many commentaries are there and other books are there. That's okay. But the idea is that I am receiving Guru Mukha Padma Vakya, Chite Te Kori Aike, Arna Kori Homani Asha. How much more clear does it have to be stated? Shri Guru Charane Rati Aishe Uttamagati, Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha. All of your desires will be fulfilled if you develop this taste. So that's our first duty. This is my answer. I hope it's satisfactory. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. It was very inspiring. And I must commend on your pronunciations of Sanskrit, just impeccable. One point that I wanted to question rather is, where do you draw the line when it comes to time, place, circumstances? This is where the danger of dilution or reinventing the wheel comes in.
Srila Prabhupada says it's the duty of the Acharya to find out novel ways and means to adjust the practice of Krishna consciousness, the application of Krishna consciousness, and even the preaching of Krishna consciousness for the time, the place, and the circumstance. So your question is, how do we do that? Well, we don't. We let the Acharya do so. Or when you become an Acharya, then you do so. That's fine with me. Until then, let's work on eligibility, my friends. Adhikaritva. पहले अधिकारित्व होना चाहिए. होना चाहिए नहीं, होना पड़ेगा. Is that okay? Simple question, simple answer.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, it's getting late, I think. Thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Bhakti-yoga Saraswati-12.12.2022. Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna.